Fake justice warrior! The words exploded across the chamber like a gunshot. Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States, hurled the insult with the arrogance of a man who thought power was untouchable. But standing before him was Jasmine Crockett, unshaken, unbroken, and burning with fury. In that room packed with 312 witnesses, 47 cameras, and millions waiting on live broadcast, silence cracked into chaos. Trump laughed as if the insult had already won him the battle. Yet behind Jasmine's eyes was not weakness, but a storm. This was no ordinary hearing. This was the collision of justice against corruption, truth against lies. In the next few moments, what began as an insult would ignite one of the fiercest confrontations Congress had ever seen. Words sharper than blades, accusations heavier than bullets, and a fight that would echo across history. And it all began right here. The chamber doors swung open, heavy as if carrying the weight of history itself. Donald Trump strode in, shoulders squared, chin tilted upward, wearing that unmistakable smirk of defiance. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts, the flashing lights ricocheting off his suit like sparks in a storm. Every step he took was loud, deliberate, echoing against marble floors that had heard centuries of truth and lies. The air thickened, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Trump paused at the witness table, turning his head ever so slightly to acknowledge the audience. It wasn't respect, it was dominance. A predator scanning the arena, daring anyone to challenge him. And then his eyes landed on her, Jasmine Crockett. She was already standing, papers in hand, her jaw clenched with unshakable resolve. No hesitation, no fear, only fury. The kind of fury born from watching injustice dance freely for far too long. Her voice cut through the chamber before Trump could even sit. Liar. One word. Razor sharp. A thunderclap in a room of whispers. Trump froze just for a second before chuckling under his breath. He leaned into the microphone, his voice dripping with venom. Fake justice warrior, he repeated mockingly, dragging out each syllable. That's all you are. A fraud in a cheap suit, screaming for attention. Gas rippled through the crowd. Some hands instinctively covered mouths. Others leaned forward, hungry for what would come next. Jasmine didn't flinch. She raised her chin higher, her eyes narrowing like a soldier drawing aim. You've lied to this country. You've stolen from its people. And today, right here, you'll face every single truth you've tried to bury. Her words landed like punches, sharp, relentless, unforgiving. Trump slammed a hand against the table. The sound reverberated like a gunshot. You think you can lecture me? He barked. You're nothing, nothing. Without me, you wouldn't even have a stage to scream on. The room erupted. Reporters scrambled for their pens. Senators exchanged nervous glances. Spectators shifted, torn between disbelief and exhilaration. This wasn't politics anymore. This was blood sport. Jasmine stepped closer, closing the gap between them as if daring him to swing. Her voice was low, dangerous, almost trembling with restrained rage. You've hidden behind power for too long, but power doesn't erase the truth, Mr. President. It exposes it. The insult stung. Trump's face reddened, his fists clenching on the desk. Pathetic little clown, he spat, his voice cracking with anger. You're nothing but noise. That's all you'll ever be. The insult hung in the air, acidic and foul. But Jasmine, she smiled. Not with joy, but with the certainty of a warrior who knew her blade had already pierced. If truth is noise, she said, her voice rising above the chaos, then let the world hear me roar. The chamber erupted again, louder this time, a wave of shouts, applause, and outrage crashing into one another. It was no longer possible to tell who was in control, because control itself was gone. Every word, every gesture was fire meeting gasoline. Each second, the confrontation escalated, tearing apart the thin veil of civility. Trump leaned forward, jabbing a finger at Jasmine, his voice a growl. You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it. Jasmine leaned in closer, so close that even the microphones struggled to separate their voices. No, she whispered, fierce and steady. The only regret here is that it took this long to hold you accountable. The audience rose to their feet. Some shouted in outrage, others cheered in defiance. The noise was deafening, A storm of fury and disbelief. Trump's mask of arrogance faltered, just for a heartbeat. His eyes flickered with something raw. Fear, perhaps, or the sudden realization that Jasmine was not here to play a part. She was here to fight, and fight she would, because this was not just a hearing, it was war. The clash had only just begun, and what unfolded next would shake not only that chamber, but the conscience of an entire nation. This is only the first blow in a battle of words, power, and truth. And if you don't want to miss how justice fights back, subscribe now to Harrison Stories and follow every twist of this historic showdown. The chamber had already turned into an inferno of noise, but that first clash was only the spark. Now the fire spread, devouring every inch of silence that once gave the room its dignity. Trump leaned back in his chair, a grin stretched unnaturally across his face, his hands gripping the armrests as if he were a king on a crumbling throne. He interrupted before Jasmine could even finish her sentence. Wrong, absolutely wrong. Everything she says. Fake, fabricated, disgusting lies. Jasmine's jaw tightened. Her words came faster, sharper, refusing to yield to his interruptions. You don't get to silence me, Mr. President. Not today. Not in front of this country. But Trump didn't care about order or rules. He thrived in chaos. He cut her off again, voice booming through the chamber microphones. Silence you? Ha, lady, you're silencing yourself with every pathetic word that comes out of your mouth. The words were daggers thrown recklessly. Some in the crowd laughed nervously, others gasped. Jasmine raised her voice above him, her anger finally spilling into the open. You've mocked women. You've mocked the poor. You've mocked entire communities of color. And you think you can mock me into silence? Try harder. The clash was relentless, like thunder colliding with thunder. Trump banged the table with his palm, cutting her off again. You don't belong here. You're not fit to question me. You are a disgrace to Congress. The chamber shook with outrage. Half the room booed, half cheered. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards, desperate to capture every vicious exchange. But Jasmine wasn't shaken. Her eyes locked on Trump, unblinking. She took a step forward, her voice slicing through the air. And yet here I am, not only fit to question you, but fit to expose you. And no matter how many times you interrupt me, the truth will drown out your lies. The audience roared. Applause collided with shouts. Every second felt like a battlefield. Trump leaned forward, his face flushed crimson, sweat glistening at his temples. You think people care about your so-called truth? They care about strength. They care about power. And you, he jabbed a finger at her, you are weak, a puppet dangling on strings you can't even see. Jasmine tilted her head, her lips curling into the faintest smirk. Funny, because the only puppet I see here is a man chained to his own fear, a man so desperate to cling to power that he drowns in his own lies. Her words cracked like a whip. The chamber fell into a stunned silence before erupting again, louder, fiercer, more divided than ever. Trump snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. Loud, black, useless. The words echoed, poisonous, charged with the venom of racism that had lingered in the veins of America for centuries. Gasps broke the air, some spectators clutching their chests in shock. Jasmine's eyes burned. She didn't retreat. She didn't flinch. She stepped closer to the microphone, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with righteous fury. Say it louder. Let every camera, every ear, every soul in this nation hear exactly what you are. A coward who hides behind insults because the truth terrifies him. The room shook again, a tempest of outrage and applause. Senators exchanged heated whispers. Journalists scribbled like mad. History was being written in real time. Carved out of venom and defiance, Trump refused to lose ground. He sneered, shaking his head. You don't scare me. You never will. I built this country stronger than anyone before me, and I will tear down anyone who tries to stand in my way. Jasmine shot back without hesitation, her words rolling like thunder. You didn't build this country. You bled it. You didn't strengthen it. You divided it. And today, every word you speak only proves that justice has been waiting far too long to catch up with you. The duel spiraled faster, fiercer. Their voices overlapped, clashing in midair, fighting for dominance. The audience leaned forward, eyes wide, as though watching a heavyweight boxing match. Some whispered prayers, others clenched fists in fury. It was no longer a hearing, it was a brawl. Trump's insults grew harsher, uglier. Jasmine's comebacks grew sharper, stronger. The energy in the room surged with every exchange, a storm feeding itself, impossible to contain. "Fraud!" Trump shouted. "Liar!" Jasmine thundered back. "Clown! Coward! Disgrace! Danger!" Each word cracked like lightning. Each insult, each accusation was a blow struck in a war that had no referee, no boundaries, no mercy. And through it all, the cameras kept rolling. Every word captured, every glare immortalized. Millions watched from their screens, their living rooms, their phones, their hearts racing as if they too were inside that chamber. The clash of voices was not just noise. It was the sound of a nation's conscience tearing itself open, forced to confront the ugliness it had tried to ignore. By the end of that hour, one truth was undeniable. Neither Trump nor Jasmine would give an inch. And as the storm raged on, the world realized this was no longer about winning an argument, it was about survival. Trump leaned back in his chair, but there was nothing relaxed about him. His grin had twisted into something darker, more venomous. He had shouted, insulted, and interrupted, yet Jasmine still stood tall, defiant, unbroken. That made him furious, so he changed tactics. He went low. Very low. "You want the truth about her?" Trump barked, stabbing the air with his finger. "This woman, this so-called congresswoman, she's a fraud in her own life, a hypocrite. Ask her about her shady donors. Ask her about the money. Ask her about the scandals she hides from you." The chamber exploded with gasps. The accusation wasn't supported by evidence, but it didn't matter. Trump didn't need facts. He needed spectacle. He wanted to stain Jasmine's name, to drag her into the mud. Jasmine froze for half a second. Shock flickered across her face, but only briefly. Her voice rose again, louder than before, trembling with rage but sharpened into steel. "How dare you? How dare you stand here and invent lies to cover up your own corruption? This isn't a courtroom drama you get to script, Mr. Trump. This is the United States Congress, and the people watching know exactly what you are, an expert at eating your own lies and spitting them back as truth." The audience stirred like a volcano before eruption. Half the room erupted in applause. The other half shouted in protest. Trump smirked, emboldened by the chaos. He raised his hand as if swearing on a Bible. "I know things about her you wouldn't believe. Things the media is too scared to print. They protect her. They worship her. But I'll say it. She's nothing more than a snake in a dress. And one day when the truth comes out, people will see what I already know." The words were slimy, dripping with innuendo, designed not to inform but to infect. Jasmine slammed her hand on the table. "Enough!" The sound echoed like a gunshot. The entire chamber froze for a heartbeat. Reporters stopped typing. Senators stopped whispering. The audience leaned forward, waiting. Her voice came low at first, seething, trembling with a fury that could no longer be contained. "You think you can smear me with your lies? You think if you shout loud enough, people won't notice your crimes? You've cheated, you've stolen, you've lied to this nation more times than anyone can count. 30,000 documented lies while you were in office. 30,000. And you want to call me dishonest?" The crowd erupted. The number alone struck like lightning. 30,000, a fact-check statistic etched into the American memory, now weaponized, fired back at the man who thought himself untouchable. Trump's face reddened. He waved his hand dismissively, trying to laugh it off. "Fake numbers, fake stats. I've done more for this country than anyone in history, and she knows it. She's terrified of it. That's why she's screaming." But Jasmine wasn't finished. She stepped closer to the microphone, her voice slicing through his bluster. "No, Mr. Trump, I'm not terrified of you. I'm disgusted by you, and I will not let your filth poison this chamber without calling it for what it is. Garbage, lies, manipulation, the oldest trick in your dirty playbook. And today, everyone watching sees it with their own eyes." The chamber boiled over. Cheers clashed with boos. Senators rose from their seats, some demanding order, others shouting over each other. It was no longer a hearing, it was a battlefield of reputations. Trump slammed his fist on the table, face twisted in fury. You think you're tough? You think the cameras make you strong? They'll forget you tomorrow. They'll forget you in an hour. But me? I'll still be here. The greatest president. The strongest voice. The one they'll never erase. His words dripped with desperation, a man clawing to rewrite his own legacy in real time. Jasmine didn't blink. You will be remembered, Mr. Trump, but not for greatness, not for strength. You'll be remembered as the man who could not tell the truth if his life depended on it. And history will carve your name beside one word: shame. The silence that followed was deafening. It lasted only a second, but it felt like forever. Then the chamber detonated with noise. Cheers, jeers, shouts, applause. The entire room had become a war zone of voices. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in on Trump's flushed face, on Jasmine's steady glare. The nation wasn't just watching a hearing anymore. They were watching a battle for America's soul. One man hurling venom, desperate to destroy. One woman refusing to break, wielding truth like a weapon. The clash was merciless, the energy unstoppable, and everyone knew this was only the beginning of the dirtiest fight of Trump's life. Then silence. Jasmine Crockett lowered her gaze, almost as if she had nothing left to say. Trump smirked, mistaking the pause for surrender. He leaned forward, eager to pounce, his voice dripping with mockery. See? She's empty. She's got nothing. Just another fake justice warrior running her mouth. I've crushed bigger enemies than her, and she'll be forgotten like the rest. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She was loading her weapon. She reached into the thick stack of folders beside her and slowly, deliberately pulled out a single sheet of paper. Her movements were calm, almost surgical. Cameras zoomed in, the air tightening like a noose around the chamber. This, she said, her voice low but clear, is not noise. This is not opinion. This is evidence. The paper shook slightly in her hand, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what it carried. She raised it high enough for everyone to see. This document, Jasmine continued, her tone sharpening, proves that Donald J. Trump knowingly lied again and again to the American people. Financial records, transactions hidden under layers of shell companies, a paper trail so dirty it reeks of corruption. The chamber gasped. A bomb had gone off. Reporters' pens flew across notepads. Photographers scrambled, flashes igniting like fireworks. The entire room buzzed, the energy now electric, volatile. Trump's grin collapsed, his face flushed crimson, eyes darting to the document as though it were a snake about to strike. He banged the table with his fist, shouting, "Fake! Fake paper! Fake numbers! She made it up! This is a witch hunt, a total witch hunt, and she's the witch!" His voice cracked with desperation, but he kept going, pouring insult upon insult, hoping the noise would drown the evidence. Jasmine stood tall, refusing to flinch. Yelling won't erase the ink, Mr. Trump. These are receipts, dates, signatures, proof. And the people deserve to see what you've been hiding behind that wall of bluster. She slapped the document onto the table, the sound echoing through the chamber like a gunshot. The camera zoomed in again, capturing the bold black letters, the official seals, the undeniable signatures. Millions of eyes across the nation leaned closer to their screens, hearts pounding. Trump's face twisted, panic leaking through the cracks of his fury. He jabbed his finger at Jasmine. She's lying. She's twisting it. They always twist it. She's got the media in her pocket. You think this is real? It's not real. But his voice, no matter how loud, carried something it hadn't before. Fear. Jasmine caught it. She smiled, just barely, a sharp glimmer of triumph flickering in her eyes. "Tell me, Mr. Trump," she said, her tone suddenly soft but deadly. "If this paper is fake, why is your signature at the bottom?" The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, thunderous whispers rippled through the chamber like waves crashing against rocks. The blow had landed. The first bomb had detonated. Trump's hands fumbled for the microphone. "It's forged. It's a forgery. These people are criminals, Liars, deep state operatives. They want to take me down because they know I'm the strongest man in this country. His words rattled, unsteady. His usual confidence now looked brittle, fragile. Jasmine didn't let up. You've called everything fake. Fake news, fake evidence, fake courts. But the only fake thing here is your integrity. And the world sees it right now, in real time. The chamber had transformed into an arena. Senators leaned forward, some pale, others smirking. Journalists typed furiously, their headlines already writing themselves. Viewers at home felt the heat, the tension, the sense that history was being made in front of their eyes. Trump, red-faced, shouted again, but the words tangled. You, don't know. This is nothing, nothing. But every syllable betrayed him. His fury wasn't power anymore. It was panic. Jasmine leaned into her microphone, delivering the final cut. The first bomb has dropped. And if you think this is the worst of it, Mr. Trump, you are gravely mistaken. Because this, she tapped the document with her finger, is only the beginning. The cameras panned across the chamber. Senators whispered to aides. Reporters whispered to one another. Every pair of eyes was locked on the battlefield, unfolding before them. It was no longer just a hearing. It was a trial before the nation. And for the first time in years, Donald Trump looked like a man cornered. But Trump had survived cornered moments before. He thrived on chaos, feeding off it like oxygen. And now, backed into a corner, he did what he always did. He lunged. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the microphones rattled. You want to talk about corruption? About lies? He shouted, voice booming through the chamber. Then let's talk about her, Jasmine Crockett, phony, power-hungry, a complete fraud pretending to be some kind of hero. She's not justice. She's ambition in disguise. She's in it for herself, for fame, for power, for the cameras. A fake justice warrior with fake courage and fake convictions. The chamber shook with noise. Trump's words sliced like broken glass, jagged and messy, but his rage gave them force. Senators whispered furiously to one another. Reporters leaned forward, pens flying, hungry for every word. Jasmine's jaw tightened, but her eyes didn't waver. She knew the move. It was classic Trump. When evidence threatened to bury him, he tried to bury the accuser instead. She inhaled slowly, then leaned into her microphone, her voice calm, deliberate, but sharp enough to cut through the chaos. Power hungry? She echoed. Is that your defense? That I want power? Let's talk about power, Mr. Trump. Who sat in the highest office in the land and used it not to serve the people, but to serve himself? Who demanded loyalty oaths? Who pressured officials to break the law? Who tried to overturn an election he lost? Power hungry? That's not me. That's you, sir. The dictionary definition of it. The audience erupted in applause, a wave of claps that shook the chamber like thunder. Trump's face flushed deeper, his jaw tightening, but Jasmine pressed on. You accuse me of being fake, but I'm standing here in front of millions, telling the truth with evidence in my hand. And you stand here drowning in your own lies, clinging to insults because you have nothing else left. Trump shot up from his chair, waving his hands trying to drown her out. Lies! All lies! She's rehearsed this. It's a script. She's performing for the cameras. I know the game better than anyone. His voice cracked again, louder but not stronger. The more he yelled, the more it sounded like desperation. Jasmine turned her gaze to the cameras, her voice steady. America, are you watching? This is what happens when truth meets corruption. He cannot answer the evidence. He cannot deny the signature. So he attacks me. He calls me names. He calls me fake. But who is the faker? The one showing proof, or the one screaming to hide from it? Every lens locked on her. Every microphone hung on her words. Even senators who had sat silently until now looked shaken, their eyes flicking nervously between Trump's rage and Jasmine's poise. Trump leaned forward, jabbing his finger toward her. She's dangerous. She wants to destroy this country with her lies, with her woke garbage, with her hatred for people like me. She wants to silence you, the American people. The words echoed, but they lacked the weight they once carried. His shouts had turned into echoes of the past, a once powerful weapon now dulled. Jasmine didn't blink. You want to talk about danger? The real danger is a leader who treats lies as weapons, who treats democracy as disposable, who treats truth as an enemy. You've called me fake, Mr. Trump, but the only fraud sitting in this chamber is you. The chamber erupted again. Shouts, cheers, applause, boos. It was chaos, but controlled chaos, and Jasmine commanded it with every syllable. Television anchors cut in with breaking news banners. Crockett vs. Trump. The hearing erupts. On social media, clips of the exchange exploded. Hashtags flying, millions watching live, millions more hitting replay, their screens filled with Trump's red face and Jasmine's unshaken stare. Trump growled into his mic again. You think you've won? You think this little stunt means anything? I've been under attack for years and I always come out on top. Always. People love me. People worship me. You're just another name on the list of losers who thought they could take me down. Jasmine leaned closer, her voice cutting through his rant like a blade. No, Mr. Trump, I'm not here to take you down. I'm here to hold you accountable. And the difference is, when this is over, you'll be remembered not as a victim, not as a hero, but as a cautionary tale of what happens when a man believes he's above the truth. The silence that followed was sharper than any insult. For a moment, even Trump faltered, his mouth half open, his chest heaving, as if the words had carved into him deeper than he expected. Then the room erupted again, louder than before. Cheers clashed with boos. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Cameras zoomed in so close you could see the sweat glistening on Trump's forehead, the steady fire in Jasmine's eyes. It wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was theater. It was war. It was history unfolding, one savage blow at a time. And the nation, millions watching at home, was holding its breath. The chamber had become a furnace. The heat of voices, the crackle of microphones, the pounding of fists on wood. It all merged into one relentless storm. Trump leaned forward, his face a mask of rage. He roared into the microphone, each word like a hammer striking steel. You're nothing, Jasmine, nothing. Without me, no one would even know your name. You live off my fame, off my power, off my shadow. You're a parasite, a leech, a nobody pretending to be somebody. The insults flew fast, one after another, like a flurry of punches. His voice cracked, but the force behind it was undeniable. He was swinging wildly, desperate to land a blow that would knock her down. Jasmine didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on him with unblinking intensity. She waited, letting the storm of his rage spill out until the chamber was shaking with echoes. Then she struck back, words precise, sharp as blades. You say no one would know my name without you? Then thank you, Mr. Trump. Thank you for proving that the only way people know your name is through scandal, through lies, through corruption. Every headline you've ever had was because of your crimes. And today the cameras are not your shield, they're your mirror. The chamber roared. Cheers collided with boos. Senators pressed their palms to their temples, trying to restore order, but it was hopeless. The storm had swallowed the room whole. Trump slammed his hand on the table again. Lies, all of it. You're a disgrace to Congress, a disgrace to this country, a disgrace to every American who believes in truth. Jasmine's reply came instantly, her voice rising to meet his. No, Mr. Trump, the disgrace is a leader who tells 30,000 lies and still dares to shout about truth. The disgrace is a man who puts himself above the law and then pretends to be a victim. The disgrace is you. Her words landed like thunderclaps, each one shaking the air. Trump lunged forward, nearly out of his chair. Shut up! You don't know a damn thing about truth. The chamber gasped. For a moment, it looked as if he might leap across the table. Two senators stepped forward, raising their hands in warning. Mr. President, please, compose yourself. But Trump wouldn't stop. His voice boomed, desperate and unhinged. They hate me because I'm strong, because I fight for the people. You, Jasmine, you're weak, pathetic, a puppet for your donors. A loud mouth with nothing behind it. "You're finished." Jasmine leaned in, eyes flashing, her voice cutting through his fury like a blade through glass. "Finished? Look around you, Mr. Trump. Look at this chamber. Look at those cameras. Look at the people watching. They're not seeing strength in you. They're seeing fear. They're seeing a man who screams because the truth terrifies him. And no matter how loud you yell, the evidence speaks louder." The chamber erupted again. Senators shouted for order, pounding gavels against the desk. But their voices were swallowed by the roar of the crowd, the clicking of cameras, the fevered energy that pulsed through every inch of the room. Trump gnashed his teeth, spittle flying as he shouted over her. "You're the liar. You're the fraud. You're the criminal, not me. I'll expose you for what you are. Phony, fake, corrupt." Jasmine's voice rose steady and unshakable, matching his fury with clarity. "Expose me? Then do it. Show them your proof." "Oh, wait, you don't have any, because there is none. You accuse, you scream, you smear. But when the dust settles, the only fraud left standing in this chamber will be you." Gasps echoed. For the first time, Trump faltered, blinking as if struck. But he recovered quickly, bellowing again, louder, trying to mask the crack. "Fake! Fraud! Enemy of the people!" The words fell heavy, familiar, recycled from rallies past. But this time, they didn't land the same. The repetition revealed desperation, a man clinging to old slogans like a drowning man to driftwood. Reporters scribbled furiously, their headlines writing themselves. "Trump unhinged, Crockett holds ground." Senators tried again to intervene, stepping closer, their voices raised. "Order! Order!" But the battle raged on. Trump's roars grew hoarse, but still he screamed, voice raw with fury. Jasmine's replies came swift, slicing, each one met with gasps and applause. It was no longer dialogue, it was combat. Words collided in midair, crashing like waves, relentless, breathless. It was a duel of stamina now. Who could outlast? Who could outfight? Who could stand while the other crumbled? And still Jasmine stood tall. Her voice rang clear above the chaos, above the roars, above the crumbling facade of a man who once thought himself untouchable. "This chamber is not your stage, Mr. Trump. It is not your rally. It is not your circus. It is a place of truth, and today the truth will not bow to your lies." The chamber shook, a storm without end. Cameras flashed, senators shouted, the audience gasped. But in the center of it all, Trump screaming, Jasmine striking back, the storm only grew fiercer, louder, more consuming. It was not just a clash of words anymore. It was a battle of wills, and neither was willing to surrender. The chamber still thundered with echoes of the clash, but Jasmine's eyes burned with a different kind of fire now. It wasn't just defiance, it was certainty, the certainty of someone holding a weapon too powerful to ignore. She reached for a folder at her side, her fingers steady despite the storm raging around her. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled out a USB drive and held it up to the cameras, letting its tiny form gleam under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Mr. Trump," she said, her voice cutting clean through the chaos, "you've called me a liar. You've called me fake. You've screamed yourself hoarse to drown out the truth. But this," she raised the drive higher, "this is truth you can't shout down." Gasps rippled across the chamber. Reporters froze mid-scribble. Senators leaned forward, their eyes narrowing. Jasmine nodded to a technician. Within seconds, the screens lining the chamber flickered to life. And then, the video played. The room went silent, as if every breath had been stolen at once. On the screen, Trump himself, his voice unmistakable, his face caught on hidden camera, his words clear, damning, undeniable. "They'll never catch me. I've got people in every corner. We bury what we need to bury. That's how the game is played. That's how you win." The chamber erupted, not in noise this time, but in stunned disbelief. Gasps, murmurs, hands clasped over mouths. The air crackled like lightning had just struck in their midst. Trump shot up from his chair, face purple with fury. "No! Fake! It's fake! A deep fake! A fraud! Another hoax cooked up by the corrupt media!" He pointed a trembling finger at Jasmine, his voice shattering against the silence. "You're the fraud, you and your crooked friends." But his words rang hollow. The screen didn't lie. His face, his voice, his confession, it was all there, larger than life, undeniable. Jasmine didn't shout. She didn't need to. She let the silence hang, let the evidence speak, let the weight of it sink deeper and deeper into every watching heart. And then, with quiet steel, she said, "This is not fake news. This is your voice, your words, your truth laid bare before the nation. You built your empire on lies, and today those lies collapse under their own weight." Trump staggered back a step. For the first time, his bluster cracked. His eyes darted wildly, toward his lawyers, toward the senators, toward the cameras. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came. Only ragged gasps that betrayed the panic clawing at his chest. He slammed his fists on the table, but it wasn't strength anymore. It was desperation, the thrashing of a cornered beast. "It's not me! It's not real! You can't believe this!" He roared. But even as he screamed, the video looped again. His voice played on repeat, damning him with every syllable. "We bury what we need to bury. That's how you win." The words echoed through the chamber like a death knell. Cameras zoomed in on Trump's face, catching every twitch, every bead of sweat, every flicker of fear. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens racing like fire. For years, he had controlled the narrative with sheer force of will, with noise, with bravado. But now the narrative controlled him. Jasmine stepped closer, her gaze never leaving him. "You can scream fake news 1,000 times, but the truth doesn't vanish just because you fear it. The American people can see, they can hear, and now they know." The chamber trembled with murmurs, the weight of realization pressing down on everyone present. Even Trump's allies shifted uncomfortably, their faces pale, their eyes avoiding the screen. And Trump, Donald J. Trump, master of spectacle, commander of chaos, suddenly looked small. His shoulders sagged under the crushing weight of his own words, his own image, his own betrayal made public. He tried again, voice cracking, reaching for the only weapon he had left. "Witch hunt! Deep state! Hoax!" But this time, the words fell flat. No cheer, no applause, no echo. Only silence. Cold, suffocating silence. The camera panned to Jasmine. She stood tall, calm, resolute, her presence a blade of truth cutting through the fog of lies. For the first time in years, Donald Trump looked not like the untouchable force he had always claimed to be, but like a man finally facing the collapse of his own empire. And in that moment, the nation, millions watching at home, saw it too. The king of noise had been silenced, the master of spin had been spun, and the second piece of evidence had struck like a hammer, cracking the armor he had spent decades building. The chamber was no longer just a battlefield. It was an execution ground for lies, and Trump was bleeding in front of the world. But when a wounded predator is cornered, it doesn't surrender. It attacks. Trump's face twisted into a mask of rage, his skin blotched red, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked ready to snap. He slammed his fists against the table and leaned forward, spitting venom with every word. "You disgusting fraud! You're nothing but a pathetic parasite feeding off my name." His voice thundered through the chamber, echoing off the marble walls. "You don't deserve to be in this room. You don't deserve to breathe the same air as me." The words were heavy, cruel, designed not to argue but to wound. He threw them like knives, each syllable dipped in venom, each phrase meant to strip Jasmine of dignity before the nation. Reporters gasped, cameras zoomed in, senators shifted uncomfortably. Some flinched, others looked away. But Trump didn't care. He was past caring. His fury had swallowed him whole. "You're a nobody," he roared, pointing his finger so violently it shook. "A fake justice warrior who'll be forgotten in a week. While he jabbed his chest, his voice breaking into a primal scream, "I will always be president." The chamber vibrated with his fury, and then Jasmine rose, slowly, calmly, her movements precise, deliberate, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. She looked at Trump, her eyes sharp as ice, her voice low but carrying across every inch of the room. Is that all you've got? Trump froze mid-breath. You call me names, you spit your poison, but it doesn't make you strong. It makes you small. Her words cut like shards of glass, steady and merciless. You hide behind insults because you're terrified of the truth. And the truth, Mr. Trump, is that you're not a president. You're a coward dressed in a suit too big for you. The chamber erupted. Gasps, shouts, nervous laughter, hands clapping over mouths. The air thickened with electricity, with disbelief, with awe. Jasmine's voice had become fire, and the flames consumed every attempt Trump made to dominate the room. Trump's face contorted. His lips trembled, but not with fear, with the need to strike back. He leaned across the table, veins bulging from his neck. "Bitch!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with raw fury. "Ungrateful, lying, two-faced bitch!" The word echoed like a gunshot. For a moment, the chamber froze in stunned silence. Some senators gasped audibly. Others whispered to aides, horrified. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She stepped closer, eyes locked on him, her voice dropping into a lethal calm. "And you," she said, each word enunciated like a hammer striking steel, "are nothing but a bloated coward too scared to face his own reflection." The room exploded. Reporters nearly fell over themselves, scribbling. Cameras clicked furiously. Voices overlapped in a storm of disbelief and exhilaration. This wasn't politics anymore. It was a street fight in the heart of democracy. It was venom against steel. Trump roared again, incoherent now, his words dissolving into snarls and curses. "You're trash, garbage. You're done. Nobody cares about you. You're a disgrace to this country." His voice cracked. Spit flew. He was shaking with rage, the mask of control utterly shattered. But Jasmine, still calm, still burning with controlled fire, waited. She let him scream himself empty, let him claw and thrash like a man drowning. And when his voice finally faltered, she struck. "Do you hear yourself?" she asked, her voice cutting clean through the noise. "That's not leadership. That's not strength. That's the cry of a desperate man who knows he's losing." Trump's mouth opened, but no sound came. His eyes darted wildly, searching for a comeback, a weapon, anything to regain control. But there was nothing left. His arsenal of insults had been stripped bare. His fury exposed him rather than protected him. The chamber fell silent again, this time not in shock, but in recognition. Recognition that the power dynamic had shifted. Recognition that Jasmine Crockett, the so-called fake justice warrior, had not only endured Trump's most vicious attacks, but had thrown them back with lethal precision. The silence broke, this time with applause. Scattered at first, cautious, then growing louder, bolder. A senator at the far end clapped. A reporter laughed out loud in disbelief. Even some of Trump's allies shifted uncomfortably, their loyalty cracking under the weight of the spectacle. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stood, tall and unbroken, while Trump seethed, trembling, his empire of noise collapsing around him. It was the climax of the storm, the moment where rage met resolve, where venom met steel. The battle of words had reached its peak, and the world, millions watching, knew they were witnessing something they would never forget. Trump had screamed. Jasmine had answered. And for the first time, his curses sounded like the last words of a king watching his throne burn. But Jasmine wasn't finished, not yet. She reached for another folder, thicker this time, the weight of it heavy in her hands. The chamber, already charged with static, seemed to still as she laid it flat on the table. She didn't rush. She let the anticipation build. Let the silence gnaw at Trump's nerves until his hands twitched on the desk before him. Then she opened it. Pages upon pages of classified documents, stamped and sealed, slid into the light. The cameras zoomed in, hungry. Reporters rose halfway out of their chairs. Senators craned their necks to see. "These are not rumors," Jasmine declared, her voice sharp as steel. "These are not anonymous whispers. These are official documents, signed, verified, undeniable." She lifted one page high, her voice rising with the weight of the revelation. "This paper proves you funneled funds illegally, covering up trails that lead directly to your personal empire. You didn't just bend the law, Mr. Trump. You broke it, and you did so knowingly. The chamber gasped. Pens scribbled furiously. Flashbulbs exploded. Trump lurched forward, his voice breaking into a guttural roar. Lies! All lies! This is fabricated garbage! He slammed his palm on the table, the sound cracking like a gunshot through the hall. I never signed that. I never saw that. This is all a setup by my enemies. But his eyes betrayed him. They darted, frantic, toward the papers as if searching for a lifeline. The tremor in his voice told a different story. Jasmine didn't hesitate. She lifted another page, her voice cutting through his denial like a blade through silk. And this, she held it aloft for the cameras, details conversations, word for word, where you plotted to silence whistleblowers. You called them rats. You said they would be dealt with. A ripple of horror swept through the room. Murmurs surged. Even hardened senators shook their heads, their faces pale. Trump's voice cracked. He slammed his fists again and again, the table rattling under his fury. Stop it! Shut up! I never said that! His voice pitched higher, a scream now. You can't prove anything! But Jasmine's eyes burned with righteous fury. She didn't shrink. She didn't falter. She raised her fist, her voice exploding into the chamber with the force of a cannon. You are a danger to justice, she thundered. Every lie you've told, every life you've trampled, every shred of democracy you've tried to bury. This is your legacy, not strength, not leadership, but corruption, fear, and disgrace. The room shook with the weight of her words. The audience, millions watching across the nation, felt the conviction in her voice vibrate through their screens, into their bones. Trump shot up from his chair, his face a mask of desperation now, not power. His fists slammed down again, his voice torn to shreds by rage. No, you won't destroy me. I am the president. I made this country great. You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing. His voice cracked mid-scream, raw and jagged. His hands trembled as they slammed the wood, again and again until the sound turned hollow, pitiful. For the first time, the great Donald J. Trump looked not invincible, but exposed, naked, his armor of bluster shattered, his empire of intimidation collapsing under the weight of evidence and the fire of Jasmine's fury. Jasmine stood tall, her breathing heavy but steady. She didn't look away. She let the silence hang, let the world watch the fall unravel before their eyes. The camera zoomed in on Trump's reddened face, on the sweat dripping down his temples, on the veins bulging at his neck. They zoomed on Jasmine, her eyes locked on him, her voice ringing in every ear. This nation deserves better than your lies, she said, quiet now but even more lethal. And today your mask is gone. America sees you for what you are. The chamber was silent, save for Trump's ragged breathing and the furious scratching of reporters' pens. The king of spectacle had been stripped bare, and in his desperation he looked less like a leader and more like a man watching his empire turn to ash in his hands. The nation felt it. The senators felt it. Trump felt it. The mask was gone. The truth was here, and there was no going back. But Trump was not alone. He never had been. As his fists trembled on the desk and his face twisted with fury, voices suddenly rose from the chamber, angry, defiant, desperate. This is a setup, one senator bellowed, his face flushed crimson. This is a witch hunt, shouted another, slamming his hand against the table. The chamber that had been teetering on silence erupted into chaos once more, but this time it wasn't Trump's voice leading the charge. It was his loyalists, his defenders, his chosen lieutenants who surged forward to protect their king. One rose from his seat, finger stabbing the air at Jasmine. You're nothing but a political assassin. You think you can humiliate a president in front of the world? Shame on you. Another slammed his palm down so hard the microphone screeched. This entire hearing is a sham. We demand this circus end now. The noise swelled like a tidal wave, drowning the chamber in rage. Supporters shouted over each other, voices overlapping, fists shaking. They weren't just defending Trump's words. They were trying to suffocate the truth itself. Trump leaned back, his lips curling into a bitter smile. For a moment, the desperation in his eyes dimmed. He fed off their fury, off their loyalty. It gave him breath, gave him fuel. But Jasmine did not waver. She stood amid the storm, her figure a lone flame in the tempest. Her gaze cut through the shouts, her voice rising above the clamor like thunder. "Sit down," she commanded, her words sharp as a whip. "All of you." The chamber froze, not in obedience, but in shock at her audacity. "You scream about witch hunts, about hoaxes, about setups," Jasmine continued, her voice unwavering, slicing through the chaos. "But what you really fear is the truth staring you in the face. You defend him not because he's right, but because you are terrified of what happens when he falls." The loyalists roared back, but she pressed on, refusing to yield an inch. "You shout sham because you cannot argue with evidence. You shout setup because you cannot answer the facts. And you call me an assassin because deep down, you know corruption cannot stand against justice." Her words landed like hammer blows. Even through the cacophony, they rang clear, piercing the armor of noise surrounding Trump. One senator rose so fast his chair toppled behind him. He jabbed his finger at Jasmine, his voice breaking with rage. "You don't belong here. This is treason." Jasmine turned to him, eyes sharp as steel. "The only treason in this chamber," she said, her tone lethal, "is defending a man who would burn this nation to keep himself in power." The audience gasped. The room vibrated with shock. Cameras captured every second, every word, every gesture. The spectacle had grown beyond Trump himself. It had become a war between truth and the mob willing to die for his lies. Trump, emboldened by his allies' outburst, shot back to his feet. His voice cracked but carried, riding on the wave of his supporters' rage. "See? See? The people stand with me. They know this is a scam. They know I am their voice." He slammed his chest with his fist, his words desperate but booming. "And no witch, no fraud, no fake warrior of justice will silence me." The room descended into near anarchy. Senators shouted over each other. Journalists shouted into microphones. Security guards moved closer to the floor, ready to intervene. For a heartbeat, it seemed fists might fly, that the chamber itself would erupt into violence. But Jasmine stood her ground. She lifted her hand high, her voice cutting through the bedlam. "Enough!" The sound cracked like thunder, echoing off the walls. Against the storm, it was a lightning strike. The chamber stilled, not silent, but subdued. The fury momentarily stunned into pause. Her chest heaved with fury, but her eyes blazed with purpose. "You can scream for him all you want," she said, her voice low, lethal. "You can try to drown me, try to bury the truth under your noise. But the truth doesn't bend to mobs. It doesn't cower before bullies. And it damn sure doesn't vanish because you call it names." She turned her gaze directly on Trump. "You can have your allies scream until their throats bleed. But the evidence is here. Your mask is gone, and the whole world is watching." Trump's brief smirk flickered, faltered, and died. His supporters shouted again, but this time their voices rang hollow, frenzied, desperate, empty. The chamber, moments from descending into chaos, now trembled under the weight of something even stronger. The inevitability of truth. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, the mob looked less like defenders of justice and more like co-conspirators trying to shield a collapsing king. And Jasmine Crockett stood tall, the flame that refused to be snuffed out. The chamber was trembling, teetering between madness and reckoning. Trump's allies shouted, his defenders clawed at the air. But Jasmine knew this was the moment. The strike had to be delivered here, in front of the cameras, before the entire nation. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted a thick folder from her desk. The room hushed. Even the most frenzied loyalists faltered as eyes locked on the bundle in her hands. The sound of rustling paper filled the silence like the creak of a noose tightening. "These," Jasmine declared, her voice a blade of steel, "are the final documents. Not rumors, not leaks, not speculation. Hard evidence. Signed, sealed, undeniable." Trump froze. His jaw clenched, but his eyes betrayed the flicker of panic he could not suppress. Jasmine opened the folder, each page a strike of lightning. Emails, bank records, secret memos. The chain of corruption laid bare. She raised one sheet high for the cameras to capture. This is your signature, Donald Trump. Not mine. Not anyone else's. Yours. Authorizing illegal transfers, directing cover-ups, silencing whistleblowers. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Journalists scrambled. Cameras zoomed. Flashes popped like gunfire. Trump's face drained of color. His lips parted, but no words came. The great showman, the eternal fighter, the man who had always found a line, a quip, a deflection, was silent. Jasmine did not let up. You told this country you were its savior, that you alone could fix it. But here, right here, is proof you were dismantling it, piece by piece, for your own gain. She slammed another page onto the table. Proof that while Americans bled, you counted dollars. While citizens cried for help, you plotted their silence. And while this nation trusted you, you betrayed that trust in writing. The chamber erupted, not with anger this time, but with an almost primal roar of recognition. It was the sound of history cracking open. Trump gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles white, his breathing heavy. His eyes darted toward his loyalists, but they no longer looked like warriors. They looked like spectators at an execution, watching their king stripped naked before the crowd. Jasmine's voice grew thunderous, each word a nail sealing the coffin. This is not just politics. This is not just scandal. This is betrayal at the highest level. And today, before God, before this chamber, before the American people, your lies end here. The chamber quaked. Senators shouted, not in protest but in awe. Journalists nearly climbed over one another to capture every syllable. The air vibrated with a single truth. The end had come. And then, silence. Trump's shoulders sagged, his fists unclenched, his mouth opened, but all that came was a shallow, broken breath. He lowered himself into his chair, his once booming presence crumbling into something small, something pitiful. The silence was deafening. For years he had roared. For years he had commanded stages, bent crowds to his will, filled rooms with his chaos. But now before the world, Donald Trump had no roar left. Only silence. Jasmine lowered the papers, her voice steady, almost soft. The truth has spoken, and even you cannot shout it down. The chamber erupted. Applause thundered, chants rose, the crowd on its feet. Journalists shouted headlines into microphones, broadcasting history as it unfolded. The spectacle was no longer a trial, it was a reckoning. Cameras flashed like lightning storms. Reporters cried out words like historic, devastating, final. Across the nation, televisions flickered with the image of a man undone and a woman who had refused to bow. Trump buried his face in his hands, his shoulders hunched, his voice trapped somewhere between rage and despair. But he said nothing, not a word. His silence was louder than any curse he had ever screamed, and Jasmine stood tall, unshaken. The chamber had become a coliseum, and the crowd roared as though the gladiator had fallen. History would remember this day, not just for the downfall of a man, but for the triumph of a truth that refused to be buried. Jasmine Crockett, flame unbroken, had delivered the final blow, and the world had witnessed a king stripped of his crown. The silence that followed was unlike anything the chamber had ever known. Reporters had run out of adjectives, senators had run out of defenses, and even Trump's allies had run out of words. At last the gavel struck. The session was over. Trump rose slowly from his chair, his body heavy, as if the weight of his own empire had finally collapsed on his shoulders. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. The once indomitable man, who had filled arenas with thunder and commanded millions with bravado, now looked like a relic. Broken, diminished, finished. The cameras caught everything. He walked toward the exit, but it was not the triumphant stride of a fighter. It was a limp, a shuffle, a retreat. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of defeat, and the chamber, once a battlefield, watched in stunned silence as the man who had called himself untouchable left the stage in shame. Outside, the world was waiting. Crowds filled the streets, Screens lit up every cafe, every bar, every home. From New York to Los Angeles, from rural towns to bustling cities, the image of Donald Trump walking out in humiliation became the picture of the hour, the day, the era. And then came Jasmine. She did not strut. She did not boast. She rose with quiet power, her posture unshaken, her eyes steady. As she stepped forward, the chamber erupted, not in chaos, but in thunderous applause. Colleagues rose to their feet. Journalists shouted her name. Across the nation, millions who had doubted, feared, or prayed for justice now saw her as the embodiment of it. Jasmine Crockett was no longer just a representative. She was a symbol. Her voice had cut through the noise. Her fire had outlasted the storm, and her courage had toppled the shadow of a man who believed himself untouchable. News anchors could barely contain their urgency. A historic moment in Washington, Jasmine Crockett emerges as the face of truth. Trump leaves in disgrace. The fight for justice has a new icon. The internet exploded. Hashtags blazed across every platform. Shocker, justice prevails. Jocker, Crockett the conqueror. Jocker, truth over Trump. Memes, chants, videos of the final blow spread like wildfire. Within hours, Jasmine's name was not just trending, it was immortalized. But inside the chamber, amid the frenzy, Jasmine remained calm. She stood at her desk, collected her papers, and looked around. To her, this was never about victory in the spotlight. It was about something deeper, something unshakable. The belief that truth, no matter how long it took, would always outlast the lies. For Trump, the nightmare had only begun. Investigations would mount. Allies would scatter. His empire of fear and bravado had cracked wide open, and nothing could glue it back together. The nation had seen too much, and for Jasmine, this was not the end of a battle. It was the beginning of a legacy. That night, the streets filled with voices. In some cities, people marched with signs of triumph. In others, crowds simply gathered, staring up at giant screens replaying the moment when Trump fell silent, and Jasmine stood tall. Children asked their parents why the man on TV looked so defeated. Parents told them, because truth finally won. It felt less like politics and more like history. Even those who had doubted her, even those who had dismissed her as a fake justice warrior, could not deny what they had witnessed. She had stared into the storm, into the fury of Trump and his defenders, and she had not only survived, she had prevailed. Days later, the headlines still rang. The Reckoning of Trump. Jasmine Crockett, voice of justice. When truth defeated power. But the truest headline of all was the one carried quietly in the hearts of millions. Justice had a new face, and that face belonged to Jasmine Crockett. As the lights dimmed, as the chamber emptied, the echoes of the clash lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. But it was not despair that remained, it was clarity. For in the end, the truth had spoken louder than power, the flame had burned brighter than the shadows, and the woman who had refused to bow had proved to the nation and to the world that justice was not a dream. It was real. It was here. It was victorious. And its name was Jasmine Crockett. In the end, this was never just about Donald Trump or Jasmine Crockett. It was about the eternal clash between truth and deceit, justice and corruption, courage and cowardice. The lesson is simple yet profound. Power may roar, it may threaten, it may blind millions for a season, but truth waits patiently, like a flame in the dark, ready to burn away the lies. And when someone dares to carry that flame, the world is reminded that justice is not a gift from the powerful. It is the birthright of us all. If this battle shook you, don't look away. Remember it. Talk about it. Pass it to someone who still believes lies should never outshout justice. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where every shadow is dragged into the light. Hit the bell because the next reckoning won't be quiet, it won't be safe, and it may just change how you understand truth and power. This tale is a fictional dramatization born from real struggles against corruption and oppression. Any resemblance to actual people or events is symbolic, crafted for reflection, critique, and courage. Thank you for watching. Justice doesn't whisper, it roars. This is Harrison Stories.